Hello, I gave a lecture on the technical report in trimester 1. I said at the time I was speaking to you in general terms about a kind of written work which belongs in the family of scientific writing. I explained that you will be required to present other forms of scientific writing during your studies at Salford. I gave some examples of the wider genre. But I promised you another session in trimester 2 in which I would focus more closely on the technical report you have to write in order to pass this module. I said it would be especially tailored to the submission which you had to prepare. As it happens, we are in the throes of the coronavirus epidemic, and as I speak, we do not know exactly how the university will manage the end of this academic year. However, I did promise you some more on report writing, so I hope this will at least help you get the subject clear in your minds for your future reference. Unfortunately, you don't have the opportunity in a filmed lecture to ask questions, so if you would like to write to me separately or channel your questions through Morgan and Martin, I will get back to you. I'm going to say something about style, content and format. Let me repeat to some degree the main points of introduction I gave last trimester on the subject of report writing. The first thing to realise is that the language of scientific writing is quite different from the nature of ordinary discourse. The way we say things to one another informally in the street or in the cafe or in our own homes has always been frowned upon in academic or scientific work. Now, the tone of voice, as it were, for scientific writing is difficult to define and therefore tricky to learn quickly. You have to live with it for some time. This being so, we tend to be relaxed with students who are new to it. But here are some points for you to remember. Don't use the active voice, use the passive voice. Don't say, "I will show that," or "we will show that." Say, "It will be shown that." Don't use slang or jargon. Don't use abbreviations without establishing their meaning at least once. There are some exceptions, of course, BBC, HRH, for example. If you use a word which is unfamiliar in any sphere of discourse, explain it once. So there are lots of do's and don'ts. Try to remember some of them. Now we're on content, and of course there are two ways of looking at the content. There's a sense in which a technical report will have content, and there's a sense in which your technical report will have to have the content that's relevant to your work. The content of a technical report is generally an account of the findings of an inquiry of some kind. Your technical report will set down the findings of an inquiry into the decisions you made about your sound recordings. I'll say more about this later. So what about the format of the report? Well, there is no fixed or standard format for a technical report, but there will be broad agreement on the elements. Typically, you can expect these: abstract, title page, acknowledgements, introduction, objectives, theory, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, recommendations, references, bibliography, appendices. In fact, we can discard many of these from the requirements of your technical report. You should include these: title page, introduction, design, results, discussion, conclusion, references, and bibliography. Okay, the elements then in more detail. The introduction is exactly what it says. In a sense, in the introduction you need to make clear what is going to be said. Don't feel you're going to spill the beans in the introduction and that you need to save stuff for later. You need to introduce what you're going to do. You're going to introduce what it is that has driven you on into this project. So if there's a question, or if you can break down your inquiry into a number of questions, let's have them in the introduction. The conclusion, which appears at the end of the work, should be somehow a bookend of the introduction. In the introduction you say what will be said, and in the conclusion you will say that it has been said, something like that. The design is the way you set about planning the project itself. So you'll have quite a bit to say about the way that you're going to test microphones or arrays of microphones for your project. It's a detailed setting out of your map, if you like, your route map through the project. And the results, in the results section, you record what you found. So let us say that you were going to try a particular microphone which hadn't been tried before, or which you hadn't tried before, and you tried it to see how it would operate. Of course, when you do that, you must have another microphone in mind, maybe the one that has been recommended to you by the academic staff. You may therefore want to make a comparison, and comparisons will form your results section. The discussion is where you identify things that you want to bring out into the open. The fact that one microphone worked particularly well when it was close to very large sources of sound. Another microphone, perhaps, you noticed that it maybe had a poor bass response when it was distanced from the source of sound. Those sorts of things you might want to put in your discussion section and discuss what reasons you could offer for that being the case. And then in the conclusion section, you want to draw together the main findings that you have identified in your discussion section. I want to say something about referencing, citations, and bibliography, and I'll come on to that now. In scientific writing, you do need to say what your sources are, particularly when it isn't your own intellectual content. So, when you mention a source within the body of the text, it's what we call a citation, and it looks like this. It will either be a quotation from the work, or possibly not. Somebody says that's something, and then all you need to put in is the surname of the author and the date in which it was published. That's a citation. The references section is an alphabetical list of all the sources that you have relied upon in the body of your text. And the reason it's there is so that anyone reading your work can look up your source to check whether you have in fact interpreted it correctly. The alphabetical listing of these works that you are referencing is done in this manner. Whereas in the citation you would merely give the author followed by the date of publication, in the references section you give an alphabetical list of all of the sources that you have relied upon in the body of the text, and the way in which they are recorded in the references section differs according to how many authors there are and what sort of publication it was that they appeared. So first of all, if it's a book with one author, you give the surname, the initial, the year of publication, the title, which is underlined, the edition, if it's applicable, the place of publication, and the publisher. Books with two authors, you would give the surname initial and the surname and the initial, the year of publication, the title underlined, the edition if applicable, the place of publication, and the publisher. The authors should be ordered as per the title page of the book. Although books are regarded as very reliable, there is another class of publication which is even more reliable than the book, and that's the journal, sometimes called academic journals, because these are peer-reviewed by other academics. The way that the journal is referenced is to give the surname of the author, the initial, the date of publication, the article title in inverted commas or quotes, the journal title in italics, the volume and the issue, and the page number. Newspapers, on the other hand, are referenced in this manner. You begin with the journalist's surname, followed by the initial, the year, the title of the article, the journal in italics, the date, and the page number. A bibliography section could easily be left out of your report because it does not really have a direct bearing on your work. But I am going to suggest that you include it. Essentially, the bibliography is a list of works which do not directly relate to your project, but which have a peripheral connection. I suggest that you include one simply for your future reference. In the future, you may remember reading a book while you were researching this project. If you don't remember the title and author, all you have to do is refer to the report you are writing now. Easy. Okay, let's say a little more about the content, and I mean particularly the content of your report rather than the elements that we normally find in a technical report. What would you put into your introduction, do you think? Well, how does this sound? You will have chosen at least 3 genres of radio. List them. Say why you chose them. Base your choices on objective matters, not likes and dislikes. This genre perhaps is particularly problematic because of the musical instruments that it tends to have. That genre poses difficult questions for miking speech contributors, for example. Then state a few questions by which you tested these various problems. Following the introduction section, you might want to put in a design section. And this is where the analysis you've made of the problems that you have to solve are itemized, and you say how you're going to pursue an agenda for testing those problems. Questions about microphone stands, windshields, things like this might well come in to this section. In the results section, which follows the design section, you may want to describe the recordings that you have made in objective terms. This recording had more presence. That microphone seemed to capture a more realistic bass response. Those kinds of issues. In the discussion section, you might want to venture some scientific explanations to the observations you made in the results section. Assemble clusters of observations which seem to agree with one another. In your conclusion section, you must be mindful of the things that you said in the introduction, but it is in your conclusion that you draw together material from the discussion which supports generally the concluding remarks that you are making. It is on this evidence that you base your conclusion. And really that's all there is to it. I hope you have found this television experience enjoyable and informative, and if I can help you further, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. I hope you're all keeping well, and I hope we get through the next few weeks without any problems.